Hello and welcome once again to Quick Security Improvements. I'm Gerald for CloudSec9 and I'll be taking you through these improvements today. Today's topic is threat models. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit on a high level of what threat models are and how that can help us to sort of become a little bit better secure. So first we're going to sit there and address what are threats. So threats are anything that are kind of bad, right? So primarily things would be like malware or ransomware, that would be or a virus. Right? There aren't too many viruses out there anymore, but there are still some. But basically anything that will do bad things on our computer, things that we don't want, or things that we're not happy about, right? So that's why we care. We care because they're going to do stuff like run up our bill, drain out our battery, sit there and threaten us and make us pay money for something if we don't do what they want. So what is a risk and how does the model work in here, right? So a risk is what's the chance that something like that could happen. So if I told you there's like a 90% chance that someday you will get some kind of a malware or virus on your computer, right? You'll be like, oh, okay, maybe there's something I should do to do something about those things, right? If I tell you it's a 1 in 1 million chance or 1 in 1 billion chance, maybe that's not so important, right? So the possibility that something could actually happen, that's what risk is, right? And a threat model is what are the threats and how risky are those threats, right? And for some people, some things are more important, and for some people they're less important. So why is that a big deal, right? So I'll tell a small story, right? So if you buy a very expensive bike in the thousands to tens of thousands of dollars of range, you're probably going to sit there and you're going to call your insurance company and you're going to get insurance for it, right? Because you're worried if it gets stolen or if it gets banged up. If you were to get into like a fender bender with a car, right, it would be very expensive to repair, and it may not be repairable and may have to be replaced, and you've already sat there and laid out a whole bunch of money for it. However, if you're going up your street and someone's having a thrift sale and they have a bike for $5 or $10, and all you're worried about is to ride it once or twice, you're probably not going to call your insurance company and ask them to sit there and insure it. In fact, you're probably not even going to sit there and go out and invest in a good lock for it, because after 2 or 3 times, if someone steals it, too bad, so sad. You got your enjoyment out of it. You wanted to ride it 2 or 3 times, right? So that's how we can visualize different threat models. It's like, how important is this to me? And even if it's likely or unlikely that something's going to happen, do I care? All right. So what can we do about threat models? So let's talk about that. So for any kind of threat, we can always, or for any kind of risk, we can always just accept the risk, right? So the thing is, if we buy a bike and we don't buy a lock with it, right? From the thrift sale, we buy a bike, we don't buy a lock, we don't sit there and have it insured. We're just saying, well, if it's stolen, we're not that we're not that unhappy if we've gotten the use out of it that we wanted. We can transfer the risk, all right? So we already talked about insurance. Basically, these are for things that would be very expensive, but they're very unlikely to happen, right? Because otherwise, insurance becomes too expensive. So things like theft of stuff in your house, having your house burned down, those are catastrophic risks, right? So they're going to be very, very expensive. But the thing is that you want to be covered. So we transfer those to an insurance company, and we pay them a premium. We pay them an amount of money every year to sit there and cover us. What they do is they collect a bunch of money from a lot of people, and only a few people have that, and that helps them to sit there and sort of defray the cost. So another thing we can do is we can avoid the risk, right? So one way that we can avoid the risk is by not doing something. So for instance, in our bike situation, if we just don't buy a bike, if we sat there and we walk instead, or we take our car, we don't have to worry about whether it's an expensive bike or an inexpensive bike. We're not going to have a bike there to have a risk of being stolen, right? So we can sit there and if we do something else, we can avoid the risk. For instance, if we're worried about even a car being stolen, we can sit there and take public transit, right? It's slower, it's more time, but it's we're not going to have to worry about having our property stolen, right? Last but not least, we can mitigate the risk, right? Usually we mitigate the risk by adding some kind of a control, right? So in the car case, right, all cars come with a car lock, right? But thieves are generally adept at getting through a basic lock in the car. But what we can do is we can add an alarm, right? We can also add other things, like we could sit there and put our car in a garage, or if we have to park it outside, we can put it in a place where there are motion sensitive lights, and motion sensitive lights can come on. They will sit there and they will alert and they can scare off people. We can also put a camera in so we could sit there and see who the people are that are coming near our car when our motion sensitive lights go, right? So this gives you some ideas about threats, mitigations, and the threat model. And the reason this is important is because you can measure then how important something is. So I'll give you a practical example. What I often do is I encourage people to have two different sets of email addresses. One which has their important things like their financial information and maybe very professional stuff, right? Like if you're sending out resumes, and then the one that collects most of their information together, right? So this way you can have like your spam and your kind of like more informal, your friend stuff and things like that, right? If your friends email, right, the ones that use your friends and kind of informally, if that gets compromised or if it gets stolen from you, it's not such a big deal, right? The thing is that it is what it is, but you'll tell all your friends your new email address, right? Whereas with professionals or with your bank, right, if that one is compromised, then like I can sit there and reset your banking password and maybe be able to siphon off money from your bank account, right? So it's not always a situation where you necessarily need to have two emails like that. Like for instance, for people who are younger or people who don't have a great deal of money in their bank. I mean, maybe you have all your money in an offshore account that isn't hooked up to an email, whatever the case may be. Then you don't have to worry if your bank account things are compromised. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is that there are mitigations for things if you think about the threats and where the threat models come from and what's important to you. Okay, I hope this has helped some people, and if you like it, please hit like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and signing off now for How to Second.